For 5 long years, she carried the weight of an unexplainable pregnancy, a mystery that defied science, logic, and the whispers of those around her. Doctors were baffled, family members torn between hope and despair, and she herself trapped in an endless cycle of waiting, longing, and fear. But nothing could have prepared them for the revelation that came during that fateful ultrasound. The moment the image flickered onto the screen, the entire obstetrics department fell into stunned silence, before tears began to fall. What they saw was beyond medical comprehension, beyond anything they had ever encountered. And in that instant, her story became something far greater than anyone had imagined. The cold gel sent a shiver down her spine as the ultrasound technician moved the probe across her swollen belly. She had done this before, countless times over the past 5 years, but today felt different. The room was unusually quiet. The doctor's brow furrowed as he adjusted the screen, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. She clenched her hands, her breath shallow. "Is everything okay?" she whispered. The technician didn't respond right away. He swallowed hard and turned to the doctor, his face pale. The doctor's eyes widened, his mouth slightly open as if struggling to form words. Then he turned the screen toward her. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. The grainy black and white image flickered, shifting slightly as the doctor adjusted the probe. And then, her heart nearly stopped. There, inside her womb, was something that should have been impossible. Not just a baby, something else. Something that had been growing inside her for 5 years. The nurse gasped. A young intern covered her mouth with both hands. One of the senior obstetricians, who had delivered thousands of babies in his lifetime, stood frozen in place, tears welling in his eyes. What is that?" she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. The doctor exhaled shakily and turned to her, his voice hoarse. "I don't know how to tell you this, but—" A sudden loud thump echoed in the room as one of the nurses fainted. The screen flickered again, the image growing sharper. And in that moment, the entire obstetrics department witnessed something that no textbook, no medical training had ever prepared them for. Her 5-year pregnancy was no longer a miracle. It was something else entirely. The silence in the room was suffocating. The doctor hesitated, his trembling hands hovering over the ultrasound machine as if afraid to touch it again. The image on the screen remained still, yet it radiated an undeniable presence. Something unseen, something unexplainable. Tears welled up in her eyes, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Tell me," she pleaded. "What's inside me?" The doctor's lips parted, but no words came out. He glanced at his colleagues, searching for an answer, any answer, but found only shock-stricken faces staring back at him. The head nurse, a woman who had worked in obstetrics for over 30 years, wiped her eyes and whispered, This isn't possible." The woman lying on the examination table felt a cold dread creeping up her spine. She turned her gaze back to the screen, and then, suddenly, the image moved. Not the way a fetus would kick or shift, but with an awareness that sent chills down the spines of everyone in the room. It turned ever so slightly as if it knew it was being watched. Then came the sound. A faint, rhythmic noise. So soft at first that they almost missed it. But as the doctor increased the volume on the machine, it grew clearer. It wasn't a heartbeat. It wasn't static. It was a whisper. A voice, distant yet eerily close, echoing from deep within her womb. "Mommy." The nurse let out a sharp cry, stumbling backward. One of the interns bolted from the room, knocking over a tray of instruments with a deafening crash. The doctor, his face drained of all color, yanked off his gloves as if they had burned him. The woman on the table gasped, clutching her stomach. She could feel it now, something shifting inside her. Something waking up. And then, for the first time in 5 years, she felt a kick, not a normal kick, a deliberate one, as if something inside her had been waiting to be found, waiting to be born. A scream built in her throat, but no sound came out. She clutched her belly, her fingers digging into her skin as the sensation inside her grew stronger. The thing, no, the being, within her moved with purpose now. Not random kicks, not involuntary twitches. It was aware. The doctor stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a chair. This can't be real," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rapid beeping of the monitors. The whispering from the ultrasound machine had faded, but its presence still lingered, pressing against the air like a phantom breath. Then the pain began. A deep, searing pain that twisted through her core. It wasn't like labor pains, it was something else, something ancient, something unnatural. Her vision blurred as sweat dripped down her temples. She tried to sit up, to move, but it felt like invisible hands were holding her down. "Help me," she gasped, reaching out blindly. The head nurse snapped out of her shock and rushed to her side, gripping her hand. "Breathe, just breathe. We need to get her into the operating room. Now." The staff sprang into action, pushing the ultrasound machine aside and unlocking the gurney brakes. The room was chaos, papers scattered, the intern who had fled still missing, the doctor shaking so hard that he barely managed to give orders. As they wheeled her toward the emergency surgical ward, she felt it again. The whisper. But this time it wasn't from the machine. It was inside her. "Mommy, I'm ready now." Her breath hitched. The voice, it wasn't cold or menacing, it was soft, innocent. But beneath that innocence was something deeper, something she couldn't comprehend. The bright lights of the hallway streaked past as they rushed her down the corridor. The operating room doors burst open and she was surrounded by masked figures preparing for an emergency C-section. The anesthesiologist leaned over her. "We need to put you under," he said urgently. "You're in distress. We need to get the baby out." The baby? Was it a baby? Her mind swirled as the drugs took hold, her body growing heavy. But just before the darkness swallowed her whole, she felt something. A hand, tiny but impossibly strong, pressing against the inside of her belly. A final whisper echoed in her mind as she drifted into unconsciousness. "Don't be scared, Mommy. I'm finally coming home." Then everything went black. Darkness surrounded her, but she wasn't alone. In the void of unconsciousness, she felt something. Someone. A presence. Warm yet unsettling. Familiar yet unknown. It wasn't the sterile coldness of the operating room. It was deeper, as if she were floating in a place beyond reality. Then, a voice. Software, childlike. "Mommy, can you hear me?" She tried to respond, but her lips wouldn't move. "I've been waiting for so long. 5 years, it was so dark, so quiet. But I heard you. I always heard you." Memories flashed through her mind. Every lonely night she had spent caressing her belly, every moment of doubt, every silent prayer. She had begged for answers, for something to make sense of the impossible pregnancy, and now the answer was speaking to her. "I had to wait until you were ready. Until they were ready." Her pulse quickened. They? Who was they? Before she could ask, everything shifted. A blinding light erupted from the darkness, pulling her back into the waking world. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of machines, the sharp scent of antiseptic. Blurred figures moving around her. She blinked, her vision adjusting to the bright hospital lights. She was in a recovery room. Her body ached, her throat dry. A nurse hovered beside her, eyes wide with both relief and something else, something close to fear. "You're awake," the nurse whispered, as if afraid to speak too loudly. Her mind raced. The surgery, the baby, the thing inside her. She forced the words from her cracked lips. Where is my baby?" The nurse's expression wavered. She hesitated. Then she glanced toward the far corner of the room. Her breath caught in her throat. A small bassinet sat there, draped in white linen. Inside, wrapped in a delicate blanket, was a child. But even from across the room she could feel it. This wasn't just any baby. It was watching her. Not in the way newborns do, with unfocused, sleepy eyes. No. This child's gaze was aware, ancient, knowing. And then, the impossible happened. The baby smiled. Not the reflexive, innocent twitch of an infant's lips. A real, deliberate smile. And in that moment, deep within her mind, she heard the whisper again. Mommy. I'm finally here. Her breath hitched. Every instinct in her body screamed that something was wrong, but at the same time, an unexplainable warmth spread through her chest. This was her child, wasn't it? The nurse shifted uneasily, avoiding her gaze. The doctors, they don't know what to say, she murmured. Your pregnancy defied science, and now... She trailed off, glancing back at the bassinet. She swallowed hard, pushing herself up despite the soreness. I want to hold my baby. The nurse hesitated for a moment too long. Then, nodding slowly, she stepped toward the bassinet. But the moment she reached for the child, the baby's tiny fingers twitched, then curled. The nurse gasped and recoiled as if she had been burned. She turned back toward the mother, eyes wide. It's warm, she stammered. Too warm. Ignoring the nurse's fear, the woman stretched out her arms. Give them to me. The nurse hesitated before carefully lifting the newborn and placing them in their mother's arms. The moment their skin touched, a shockwave of sensation coursed through her body, like touching a live wire, yet not painful. It was energy, a force she couldn't describe. And then, the baby opened its mouth, not to cry, to speak. A sound, soft, almost melodic, filled the air. Not a human word, but something ancient, something forgotten. The air in the room grew thick, humming with invisible vibrations. The machines flickered, the lights dimmed. The nurse stumbled backward, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. The mother clutched the child to her chest, her mind screaming that this wasn't normal, that no newborn should be able to do this. But then, as if sensing her fear, the baby looked up at her, those impossibly deep, knowing eyes locking onto hers. And then, in her mind, clear as day, she heard it again. Don't be afraid, Mommy. You're the reason I'm here. Her heart slammed against her ribs. This child, this being, it had chosen her. Her hands trembled as she cradled the baby closer. The warmth from its tiny body seeped into her, deeper than skin, into her bones, her mind, her soul. The nurse had backed into a corner, her breath shallow, eyes flicking toward the door as if considering running. But the mother couldn't move, couldn't look away from the being in her arms. You're the reason I'm here. The words echoed in her mind, not spoken aloud but felt. Swallowing hard, she whispered, Who? What are you? The baby blinked, its tiny fingers curling into the fabric of her hospital gown. For a moment there was silence. Then she saw. Memories, not hers, rushed through her mind like a flood. Visions of a place beyond time, a space of swirling light and endless dark, a place where voices hummed in harmony, where beings of energy and consciousness moved freely untethered by flesh. And then she saw herself, alone, crying, praying in the dead of night for something, someone, to fill the emptiness inside her. You called me, the voice inside her whispered. Her breath hitched. No, that wasn't possible. She had struggled with infertility for years before this pregnancy. Doctors had given up hope. She had resigned herself to a life without a child, her heart aching with every failed attempt. And in her despair she had wished, begged, pleaded to the universe for a miracle, and something had answered. Tears welled in her eyes. You're not human, are you? The baby, her child, tilted its head, as if considering the question. I am what you needed me to be. A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. The nurse flinched. The mother stiffened, instinctively clutching the baby closer. The door creaked open and the doctor stepped inside, flanked by two others. Their expressions were unreadable, but there was something in their eyes. Fear, yes, but also determination. We need to take the baby for further tests, the doctor said carefully. This isn't normal. We need to understand. No. Her voice was firmer than she expected. The doctors exchanged glances. The lead doctor took a slow step forward. We don't know what's happening. We need to. The machines in the room flickered again. The lights dimmed. And then, from deep within her arms, a pulse of warmth spread outward. The doctors gasped as an unseen force pushed them back, gently but firmly, like an invisible barrier between them and the mother and child. Her baby's voice returned to her mind. I won't let them take me. A realization settled over her like a weight. If they took the baby, her child, away, she would never see them again. She felt it. This being, this miracle, had come to her because she had called for it. It wasn't meant to be taken, studied, locked away in a lab like some specimen. It had chosen her, and now she had to choose too. Tears burned in her eyes. She inhaled sharply, cradling the baby closer, feeling its warmth seep into her heart. Then she made her decision. She didn't think. She just moved. With her child cradled against her chest, she shoved past the stunned doctors, ignoring their shouts as she bolted into the dimly lit hospital corridor. Her bare feet slapped against the cold tile floor, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Behind her, alarms blared. Footsteps pounded as nurses and security scram. Mommy, keep going. The whisper wasn't just in her mind, it was inside her, guiding her. Doors flew open before she could reach for them. The overhead lights flickered wildly, surges of unseen energy rippling through the air. She felt it, as if the very hospital itself was bending to the will of the child in her arms. She burst through the emergency exit and into the night. Cold air hit her skin, but the warmth of the baby shielded her from the chill. The city streets stretched before her, empty, eerily quiet. Then, headlights. A car skidded to a stop in front of her. For a split second, panic gripped her. Had they sent someone after her? But then the driver's side door flew open. Get in. It was the nurse, the same nurse who had been there in the delivery room, who had seen what no one else had truly understood. Without hesitation, she climbed into the car. The moment the door slammed shut, the tires screeched and they sped into the night. Her heart pounded. Where are we going? The nurse's hands were tight on the wheel, her knuckles white. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't take the baby. She looked down at the tiny face nestled against her. The child gazed up at her, calm, knowing. I told you, Mommy. You're the reason I'm here. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She understood now. This child, her child, was never meant to belong to anyone else. Not science, not the doctors, not the world. Only to her. As the city lights blurred past, a peace settled over her. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in 5 years, she wasn't afraid. She held her child close and whispered, I've got you now. And in her mind, the voice answered soft and content. I know.